I recently had the privilege of interviewing an accountant who's made significant changes to his accountancy practice, so much so that he's gone from being at the depths of despair to growing what is now, at the time of this video, a £5 million practice, and it's continuing to grow exponentially. I'm going to let Paul tell you his story. I suspect that you will relate very much to where he was, his circumstances before he started to make these changes. Over to Paul.
Okay, so I'm Paul Carvell. Been at SFB for about 26 years. The business itself has been expanding over gradually and steadily over the last few years. I took over as senior partner here. It was partnership then, about 9 years ago. I think I'm coming up to my 10th year at the moment, and pretty much from that point of view, the business has grown substantially, probably about a 5-time growth since in that period, in both turnover and bottom line. When we came back into AVN, there were 6 of us, and I'd done some figures, and I was probably earning about 50% of the fees of the practice, and I had about 80% of the growth was coming via me. So very early, when I first joined AVN, the second time, we were about 800,000 turnover. We had about 30 staff. Don't do the ratios and whether that makes sense, but that's where we were. And now we're, as you're saying, we're sort of 5 mil and about 100 staff. I had no support. I was just working. I was doing it all, and so the real thing was, hang on, if I do any more, how the business will suffer as a result of that. And emotionally, I was worn out as well. I'll be honest, I was completely worn out. I mean, I wouldn't be thinking of leaving. My life had been into this place, and to actually think that I would leave, I would actually walk away from this was incredible.
Did you take us? You joined AVN twice, didn't you?
Yeah, we joined Steve on his second ever masterclass. We were actually right at the very early days. I think that was, oh gosh, that would be 98. Was it 98? I know it was in the 90s. And we had, it was 5 days it was over. It was sort of structured, but not. It's not like it is now. I mean, it was completely information overload, and you didn't know where to start. And there was, at that time, there were 5 or 6 partners in the practice, but the 3, we were young then. I had hair and it wasn't grey, and the 3 youngsters were the ones that said we're going to go onto this course and find out all about this new approach to accounting, and we went along. And we were bowled over, absolutely bowled over. I remember they showed the Gerber video, which I think you've probably still got now, which was brilliant. I've still got. And, we went along and it was absolutely brilliant. We came back absolutely buzzing. Absolutely buzzing. But the old people here, or the older partners here, just did not get it. So we tried to do our own thing. We ended up almost having 2 practices, but it failed, and so we pulled out, because we weren't the leaders of the business at that point, and if the leader hasn't got it on board, it just isn't going to work. So we pulled out. Go forward a few years, I can't remember when it was, myself and the then junior partner, he's still the junior partner, but now we're directors, the 2 of us who own this place, we decided we'll go again to AVM. And we were, I'll be honest with you, the practice had, I won't even say it had actually was going at a level, it was actually going down. Our business was beginning to go in the wrong direction, and we were getting smaller, and we had more pressures, and we had everything. And we went along to an AVN, which was again not far from here. It was at the Motorbike Museum, and we went there, and we sat at the back, because that meant we could be like naughty boys and talk, while everybody else was doing their bits at the front. And we had a chat, and 2 things came out of that. 1, we decided to rejoin. 2, I had a chat with Jonathan Holroyd. Do you know Jonathan? Oh, yeah. Good Yorkshire guy who tells things straight. So I had a chat with him afterwards, and I said we're upset, and he said, well, you either put up or do something about it, or shut up. Basically, is what he said. So I thought, well, I've got to do something about it. So as a result of that, we rejoined AVM, which was great. I then came back and said, I want to take over.
My time with Paul was 2.5 hours of interviewing Paul, asking him lots of questions and getting fantastic, pure gold style answers. I've chunked down this video to be in less than 20 minutes altogether, and I've categorized the key elements of Paul's growth into 7 areas, starting with clarity. How did he get absolute clarity? Over to Paul.
I decided I needed space to think. And I did this for 3 years. I had a friend of mine who had a place in Cyprus, which was great. And I went over, and he worked hard as well. He was in business, and we went over, and he let me have his car, and we Actually, he became a tourist of his own island, to be honest with you. But 3 years in the Trot, I went over for 1 week on my own, without the children, without my wife, without anything from work. And I took a computer and a book, and I used to go off to an internet cafe, bar really, overlooking the sea, and think. And I then planned out what we should be doing, and I did in several things. What's the short-term things, what's the long-term things, and what the vision. I started thinking about what the visions were, what services I wanted to offer, what I wanted us to sort of look like. And I was saying to you, that book is still at the side of my desk now. Some of the things we've done, some of the things we haven't, but I just brain drained myself and got it down on writing. Because actually I do believe if you write it, you own it. And again, you've got this thing about kinetic and auto. I'm a kinetic person. I have to physically do something. But I went down and did that, and that was perhaps the most important thing of all. And then I drew diagrams as to what I think it would be, and I actually visualised in my head what I thought this would be. It's not actually, it hasn't come out to be quite that visualisation, but it was the start of that journey. So I just visualised it, but I gave myself space to do that. And so I did that 3 years on the Trot, and they were super invaluable, absolutely super invaluable time.
The next thing I observed with Paul is that he really positioned his practice as being very different in the marketplace. One of the ways he positioned himself as being different was through his values.
Core values,
yes,
which we've really have developed over years, and I'm really happy with that. It's called EPIC, so and we measure everything to, or we don't measure everything, we begin to measure more and more to make sure it's EPIC. And EPIC stands for enjoyable, professional, innovative and commercial. That's what they all stand for. And the only thing I've imposed on SFB, the only thing I've imposed that hasn't been team, because the EPIC was team, actually everybody decided that, not me, is my vision, which is actually still there. It's effectively become our strap line, but it's a vision, which is helping you achieve your goals.
In addition to his values and his core vision statement, I noticed from Paul's website that his practice has achieved lots of awards. That adds much more credibility to his accountancy practice than maybe his competitors. He's got a special area on his website where he differentiates himself from other accountants. And all of these factors lead to differentiating and better positioning the accountancy practice. The next category that I've chunked the conversations down to is value, the way that Paul's practice is delivering much more value to his clients.
The thing is, now what we do as normal, other practices will consider to be value added. And I think actually when you do it all the time, you're not quite sure what is value added because it becomes part of your normal procedure. We do woo charts. I don't know if you do woo charts. Yeah. We do woo charts, and actually within those woo charts are targeted stuff for each client. But then we start doing other services which other companies will consider added value and which we consider part of our core. Whatever that may be, I don't know, whether it's succession planning, whether it's business growth, whatever it may be, whether it's information services. There may be little bits that you would have done with we used to do Making It Happen. Do you remember the Making It Happen program? Yeah. We did a few of those, and when you take turnover and how will you make that, and how would you do the feeder of information and that sort of thing. Well, we just do that as normal now. So and you tend to blur what becomes added value and what becomes just your normal offering. It's interesting. It's quite interesting. But I think actually it's not so much added value as is doing more than you would normally do. You just got to keep pushing yourself that you can do more for a client.
A business can only go so far, can't it, if it's reliant on one person. My next category is how Paul has geared up his practice. Let Paul talk to you about gearing.
If you're the only person, you can't do anymore. You can increase your prices, which is what a lot of people say, increase your prices. Well, that's fine, yeah, and because obviously pricing is very important, get that to the bottom line. But once you've increased your prices to maximum and you're selling at that level, where do you go beyond that if you're the only person doing it? You can't. So you've got to let go and you gear up your trade. You see, I come from a family of sheet metal bashers, and I worked in that business, which was great. Now, what you do in an engineering business or a manufacturing type business is you make more money by producing more goods, and that means you just make a machine work longer, or you buy another machine, and you gear it up. You actually can do more. You can do more work. And there's no difference between that and human beings. There is no difference at all. But this is where letting go is the problem. If you've got an owner that says that nobody's as good as you and won't let go, you cannot create more time. But if you've got an owner that will let go and gear up, and they gear up with humans, with people, and with computer systems, then all of a sudden accountancy practice can gear. But you need to give yourself freedom, and that actually, for me, the single thing is how to give yourself freedom. And that, I think, is when we met, you saw me, I talked about how I gave myself freedom, and I still use that analogy today. I still use freedom as being the way that we go forward. So there I was the biggest fee earner. Although I did all that work, actually the service levels to those clients, and we are a service industry, was pathetic. You can't do all those and actually provide a fantastic service. So they started seeing other people, service levels went up, and our growth went up immediately, straight away. It was quite interesting.
How did your team react to being handed the responsibility of the client base?
Well, it varied, but for the majority it was a bit like, you know, a rabbit looking at staring at headlamps sort of thing. I think there was an element of that, and for the next few years it was how to get the team. I mean, my team now is completely different. It's completely different. Not the people. They will tell you, if you ever interview any of my team, they've been the ones that have been with me all this while, that they've been on a roller coaster, and they cannot remember what the business was like then, because the business has just changed. And then there was a period of just rapid change. So that vision's as much for the staff and the team that work here as it is for our clients.
That's a good point.
So we actually sit down and we want to know what our team's visions and goals are, and what their aspirations are, and we really work hard on that, to be honest with you. And then they get into that idea for clients.
As you begin to scale your practice through your team, you need to make sure that your incredibly high standards are delivered time and time again in a consistent fashion. But in addition to that, you want to make sure that those standards are continually being raised as well, don't you? Raising the bar and making sure that those systems, those standards are being followed every single time without fail. How have you really made SFB, certainly in the accountancy side of it, as scalable as it is? What do you think has been the key to that?
Systems. It's as simple as that. But having really good systems, and people systems are the most important thing. And I think there are things that are really good in systems, but I also believe there should be some, me personally, I think there should be some flexibility in the system. So I think like that all the way absolutely gets in the way. So there should be certain things that you can't go beyond, there should be certain things which you have a certain amount of flexibility. So build a bit of flexibility into them. I also believe that actually you should all have the same system, and if that system isn't right, you should change it for everybody. For me, it's not so much the system being followed, it's the policing of the system, because everybody will break a system. So I'm really putting in key now, we are strategically looking at key areas that we're going to be policing. But I think, because you can have a system, but you then find they're not working, or they're not being followed, or they're being varied. And they're being varied because actually what you said as a system here, when you wrote it out and thought it was really good, in practice doesn't work, or something doesn't happen. So you've got to make sure you're making sure that's right. And so the policing is as much to make sure that if one person breaks a system because it's not working, then instead of having 8 people create their own version of that, we do it all together. So systems are the key, and they're key to growth. They are key to growth. But you should never think our system's God. And now when I go away, I have 2 phones. I have the business phones and I have the private phone, and I tend not to do much with work. I think there's only 2 people got my private telephone number in the whole office. That's it. So if that rings, I know it's really desperate. I will tell you, my first Eureka moment, I got that right. Myself and Mel, that's my wife, we went off and toured the east coast of America, which was lovely. And we did 3 weeks just touring. And I had no phone calls at all, nothing. There was no interruptions with work. And I walked into the office and I had nothing to do. So I had been away for 3 weeks, I had nothing to do. And I then actually bored everybody and upset them, because I then started telling them about the great holiday I'd been on, because I wanted to do something. And that was one of my first Eureka moments, when I thought, yeah, I'm getting this right. But then, because I've got all these other things going on now, some have failed, some have worked, and that seems to be what I'm doing. So I let this place run itself reasonably well. I am the leader, and I do have a bit on there. We have a fantastic management structure. I have a fantastic management information reporting system which we've developed, and we have a really good internal system.
One of the things that Paul told me was that he's regularly involved in speaking opportunities, getting in front of audiences of potential clients. And that's a great way to build the profile of Paul himself, but also of SFB Group. And I noticed there are many other activities going on that are ultimately raising the profile of the practice. They have a Facebook page. They're regularly submitting entries to that Facebook page, so they're getting in front of a wider audience. Maybe an audience of people who don't yet know them well enough to want to be a customer, but they're being trickle-fed information about them. They have blog sites. They have a YouTube channel. And they're regularly posting to all of these different places. And there are press releases as well for the activities that they're getting involved in, whether it's charitable events, whether it's Paul's activities within the chamber. So they're ultimately raising the profile of the practice. The final part of this video for me is the most inspirational. In this next section, Paul shares the many different ways he's giving something back, helping his team develop, helping his clients develop their businesses, being much more purposeful.
They have their own aspirations, they have their own dreams, they have their own desires, and you've got to make sure that you work with them to achieve what that is. And that's what we do. And so some people don't want to work with us. So I had one young chap, brilliant guy, absolutely brilliant, he wanted to be a teacher. So I attempted to get him a work experience at a school to help him to do that. And there's various other examples of things like that we've done, is that certain people with certain profiles are better at coaching than others. And so we've identified those of our team that are more likely to be good at coaching and those that aren't. So we've actually profiled everybody. Yeah. So we've identified the ones, because you need to be able to think on your feet with coaching. You can do the initial coaching following a system, but after that, one of the things I know is actually when you coach a client, or mentor a client, you have to be able to react to what's coming back. But and in the meantime, all that's going on. I've been the president of the local chamber of commerce, which was fun. Right. We're a member of 4 chambers, I think, or 5 chambers. But that was quite good. So that got me down to Parliament a lot. So I actually spent a lot of time, going down there. And the best meeting I had was actually I met Osborne 3 times when he was Chancellor, and he invited me to number 11. So that was fun. And actually, I was in the European Parliament just before the vote, and that was quite good. And actually, last month I've been campaigning to change a personal crusade to try and change the tax rules on exporting, because I actually think we've got to export more.
And in terms of helping his fellow accountants, arguably competition, Paul has attended our events talking to other accountants about his success and what he's done, and he's left some great advice for you as well at the end of this video.
Allow your team to make mistakes. Allow them to get it wrong. Don't get it right first time. You yourself are where you are because you've made mistakes and you've learned from them. And then we try and make everybody get it right. And then if they don't get it right, we punish them. Actually, that's the worst thing you should do. Embrace them, but make sure they don't get it wrong 3 times fine. But let them make mistakes. And I think that is something that we, and the UK and the world and Europe and all the rest of it is now get it right, get it right, get it right, get it right. All the time, you've got to get it right. And do you know what? That isn't life. And so we've got to somehow or other allow that freedom in there, which I do. So that's my one real bit of advice.
I hope you'll agree with me that Paul's journey has been absolutely, truly inspirational. Paul's put a lot of effort into making those changes within his practice. And of course, transformational change like that requires a great deal of effort. It also requires support and help and knowledge and expertise in doing exactly that. If you're prepared to put the effort in and you'd like to tap into the type of help, support and expertise that would be required to help you make similar changes that Paul's made in his practice, then AVN can help you do that. We can help you achieve more clarity, better positioning, adding value, gearing up your practice, creating an automated practice, building your profile, and ultimately becoming much more purposeful. If you'd like to know more about how we can help you, then click the link below to download an information pack right now. All the best. Bye-bye.